Miho didn't understand where this girl came from. She pointed her finger at her and asked our hero who she was. Meanwhile, Haru was surprised to hear the word daddy. Our hero didn't understand what was going on, so he turned to the fox. A new system message informed him that the quest had been completed. Now Miho has become his pet. Our hero was very surprised because it was an unexpected reward. Now he has to tell everyone that she's his daughter. The other heroes began to make fun of him. Hendrik was surprised that humans could give birth to foxes. Meanwhile, Haru came very close and fell to her knees. Her expression was completely bizarre, and she was talking nonsense. The girl convinced herself that she had to take it for granted. Meanwhile, Hendrik came closer to meet Haru. He told her that he was a dragon and was here to help our hero. But suddenly, Haru's look changed greatly at the sight of this figure. The terrible memories of the burned village came back to Haru. She remembered how everything around her was burning in a terrible fire. The goblins tried to escape and ran away, while the little girl cried loudly, unable to cope with the situation. This figure reminded her of the previously familiar silhouette responsible for everything that had happened in the village. It seemed to be the same dragon that had burned down her village. With intense anger, the girl gritted her teeth and quickly grabbed her sword. She prepared to strike. Shouting the word, "Die!" loudly, she swung her sword. Hendrik barely managed to block the powerful blow in time. Hendrik turned to our hero and asked for his help in explaining to this girl why he was really here. But the protagonist just smiled and told Hendrik to deal with the situation himself. He had no choice but to accept the duel, even though he realized that the girl might get hurt badly. Meanwhile, Haru tried to land another blow on Hendrik. She was very angry and wild, but she was no threat to Hendrik, and he just smiled. After his thoughts, he swung his sword sharply and threw the girl a long way away. His sword stroke was so powerful that Haru flew through the thick forest for a long distance. But as soon as the dust settled on the ground, Haru prepared for another attack and ran towards Hendrik. The two swords of our heroes clashed again, and their faces were extremely serious, especially the girl's. Hendrik explained that the girl was strong enough, but it wasn't enough to defeat him. He called his dragon to his aid, and it began to fight Haru. The girl felt this incredible power and could do nothing. Hendrik once again threw Haru a great distance away, causing her to dig a huge trench in the ground. The difference in strength was so great that she lay motionless on the ground, unable to move. She was convinced that the enemy was right in front of her, but she didn't have the strength to take revenge on him. A smiling Hendrik appeared directly above the girl and said that he was the dragon. Laughing loudly, he shouted to the goblin girl that this time he would give her the power to kill him. He would prove to her why they called him the Dragon Slayer. It was then that the girl found the strength to make another attack. She lunged at Hendrik, but he just smiled and said that she looked very funny. Haru shouted loudly and swung her hand to deliver a powerful blow. But to the girl's dismay, Hendrik easily deflected the attack. Haru was extremely surprised because he could only do it with one hand. In the next second, Hendrik kicked her in the stomach with his foot. The air comes out of her mouth and she immediately falls to her knees. Hendrik explained to her that his sword was much stronger than hers. The girl understood that the Dragon Slayer's sword was very strong. All their thoughts were on one thing: revenge. Hendrik expected another attack and was overjoyed. Magical energy swirled around him, while Haru's sword emitted pink mana. Her eyes shone brightly, and she walked in Hendrik's direction. The dragon was surprised by her appearance and couldn't believe his eyes. The girl found her strength and shouted loudly that he would pay for the dead goblins in the village. Haru made a powerful jump and prepared for another attack, while Hendrik realized that her strength exceeded her current level. So the sword gave her new strength for the battle. The dragon realized that the owner of such a sword could be in danger. Reflecting her attack with ease, he motioned for the girl to let go of her sword. He shouted at her that the power of the sword was like a parasite sucking on her. She can't handle that kind of energy alone. Hendrik's words began to reach the girl, who gritted her teeth and didn't know what to do next. The burned village was still in her mind, and she wanted to take revenge. In the next second, Haru's eyes heated up and glowed even brighter. After that, she shouted loudly that she would only let go of the sword if the dragon died. Haryu began to swing her sword quickly, cutting the giant rocks in half. After a while, the girl calmed down, and Hendrik watched her from the air. He realized that she also hated dragons intensely. They had a lot in common. In that case, he must prevent her from carrying out her plan. At that moment, a huge magical dragon appeared above his head. With a stern voice, Hendrik told her that the girl would be in great pain, but she would not die. Haryu's eyes were filled with fear, for she did not understand what was about to happen. In the next second, a huge, powerful beam of fire rained down on the cute girl. At the same time, a huge explosion was heard, which felled many trees in the forest. The shock wave threw Haryu high into the air, and her sword fell from her hands. As she fell to the ground, she began to lose consciousness. Suddenly, Haryu found herself in a familiar place. It was a forest near a goblin village. A soccer ball lay at her feet. She picked it up and held it in her hands. Suddenly, someone called out to her, and she turned in the direction of the sound. She was approached by some boys from the village who had lost their ball. They were very grateful that she had found it. But the next second, the little goblin girl suddenly asked Haryu why she was the only one to survive out of everyone in the village. Haryu was struck with a deep fear as she realized that there were dead people in front of her. Suddenly, the girl's small hand touched her shoulder, and in the next second, the little girl's face became terribly frightening. She moved as close as she could to Haryu and begged him to save her. The little girl's soul cried out that she wanted to live just like Haryu. The girl's eyes filled with tears, and cold sweat ran down her back. At this point, the voices became louder and the dead villagers became more numerous. They couldn't stop asking Haryu why she was the only one to survive. Haryu gritted her teeth and couldn't understand how she managed to survive. Suddenly, a dragon appeared in front of her and told her that she survived because she had to stay alive. Our hero added that a person who could hold the dragon slayer's sword in his hands was bound to survive. Even if all the goblins died, the only one who could avenge them would be Haryu. Hendrik ordered her to stand up, and the girl rose to her feet. Suddenly, Haryu said that the goblins were a tribe that never forgot gratitude and revenge. Her words took Hendrik by surprise. It amazed him that she was able to get up after such a powerful attack. But in the next second, Haryu rushed towards him with her sword out. Her eyes were covered with a white veil, and she screamed loudly. Her sharp blade was able to penetrate Hendrik's body. Her attack seemed to be successful. However, it turned out that her weapon shattered into small pieces, leaving Hendrik unharmed. Our hero looked down at her and declared that this was her limit. He then added that the girl must become stronger. She must become strong enough to avenge all the dead goblins. Our two heroes fell from the sky to the ground, and the girl lay in the middle of Hendrik's chest. The masked man and the spirit master rushed over to see if they were all right. Hendrik declared that he was fine, while the girl lay motionless, using all her strength. He was happy to see her head on his chest. Hendrik explained that she was very tired and needed some sleep. Sometime later, in one of the city's hotels, the girl lay motionless in bed, her eyes closed. While our heroes realized that she had exhausted her body and gone beyond its limits, Hendrik explained that she would probably try to attack him again when she opened her eyes. He understood that there were dragons among those who attacked the village, so her behavior was obvious. In that case, she would have to overcome her aversion, since the weapon's misbehavior was the master's fault. Our hero thought for a moment and didn't know what to say. Then he called Hendrik outside to continue the conversation. The protagonist told his friend that he had the whole second floor to himself. Hendrik replied that there was no need to worry about his feelings. But the young man shouted that he wasn't worried about Hendrik, but about Haryu. She would feel safer without a dragon at her side. A light breeze blew the curtains aside in the room where Haryu was still sleeping. She slowly came to her senses and opened her eyes. She didn't realize who was standing in front of her and thought it was her little brother. The girl in the form of a vixen was very happy to see her wake up. However, Haryu did not share her excitement and was terrified. Our protagonist entered the room. Haryu replied that she had come to her senses, although she still didn't understand what had happened to her. The girl in the shape of a fox called our hero her daddy again. But suddenly, Haryu's vision blurred again and she fainted again. Our hero asked Miho to be quiet, so as not to frighten Har. The young goblin slept soundly in her bed. After a while, all our heroes were on the street. They gathered all their belongings to leave the 10th floor. Haru said with a smile that even though her sword was broken, it was as if it was still a part of her. Hendrik explained that all his things were made of magic, so he hadn't forgotten anything. Miho replied in the same way, saying that she didn't have any belongings left here. Our hero was surprised because Miho didn't call him daddy, but big brother. Haru happily informed the protagonist that she was the one who taught Miho that word. According to Haru, Miho was still very young, so of course she couldn't tell the difference between her daddy and her big brother. The goblin girl looked sternly in Miho's direction and demanded that she call our hero by his new name, Big Brother. Suddenly, our protagonist held out some scrolls to his friends. It was a scroll about moving through space. If you tore it, you could be transported to the hall prepared by the Golden Lich. Although it was very expensive, our heroes could still afford it. The Spirit Master shouted, because he also wanted to get his scroll. The masked man replied that he had almost forgotten about his friend and snapped his fingers. After that, Vulcan began to move quickly to the magical center in our hero's body. Now that everything was ready, our hero proposed to leave. After saying that, he tore one of the magic scrolls in half. Suddenly, all of our heroes began to teleport through space. They entered a large, spacious, lavishly decorated room that the Golden Lich had prepared in advance. Everything in this room was made of magic. Suddenly, someone else appeared next to Haru. It was the same blacksmith from the village who recognized his relative. Haru was happy to see her grandfather and rushed over to hug him. They sobbed loudly and tears streamed from their eyes. They finally met. It was a great relief for our heroes. Suddenly, someone else appeared in the room and loudly opened the doors. The Golden Lich entered the room. Our hero asked his friend to keep his voice down in front of the goblins, who were still crying loudly. The puppeteer behind his master's back couldn't believe that our hero had been named the Death Star. Removing the mask from his face, the young man replied that it was him, the one who died 10 years ago, but was still alive. After a while, the Golden Lich finished reading his report. All of our heroes have gathered in this new guild to make a great decision. The puppet master raised his hand, for he still had questions. He didn't fully understand the report. It turns out that the 4 creatures have been secretly destroying goblins with certain abilities all this time. Even the ghost mask, that is, our hero, is a victim who is resurrected. Our hero confirmed the puppeteer's conclusion and said that their main goal was to take revenge on everyone who had wronged them. Smiling, the young man said the word confrontation out loud. He was determined to turn the whole world upside down. His words had completely captivated everyone in the room. The door to the magic room was still open. The Golden Lich asked our hero what he would do next. With a smile, the young man replied that he had no choice but to continue climbing the tower. The rest of us had to do the same, to maximize our strength. According to our hero, in order to survive the storm, you have to become a hurricane yourself. Suddenly, Haru appeared behind Grandpa's back. She took her relative's hand and asked him if he would continue to climb the tower with them. The old man looked away and thanked her for her flattering words. Suddenly, he announced to her that he would have to travel separately from the rest of the team. These words shocked Haru to the core, and the smith added that he would make sure the girl was safe. He felt his anger diminish as well as Haru's. In his opinion, if they fought together, they would calm down and stop fighting. The goblin's last sword could not be dulled because of an old man like him. After saying that, he held out the scroll to the girl and said that he would now have a different name. He advised the girl to remember the anger and responsibility that every goblin has. She had to take her revenge. Our hero went over to Haru and took her by the shoulder. He said he had a job for the blacksmith. The young man added that he wanted to establish his guild's base on the 100th floor. He asked the Golden Lich to investigate the goblin village. The CEO replied that it would be no problem as long as he chose a property manager. Our hero immediately declared that he had the right person for the job, the best blacksmith among the goblins. A longtime resident of the 100th floor and well-versed in the area. Having said these words, the Golden Lich hesitated. Then he ordered the puppeteer to take the blacksmith to the 100th floor. The manager of the company approached the old man and said that he would accompany him on this journey. Now that everyone's goals were set, our hero said it was time for them to hit the road. All of our heroes, our entire standoff force, were ready for future battles. Putting on his most powerful goblin mask, the protagonist added that they must live up to the guild's name. After a while, the protagonist found himself in the safe zone of the 11th floor. He stepped out of the magic portal and turned his attention to the tower that stood in the middle of the city. He now realized that this was the real beginning of his revenge, and he would deal with all those who had previously mistreated him. He will find and punish each and every one of them and avenge all that they have done to him. His enemies can only wait. He doesn't care how high they have risen, because he will destroy them. But suddenly someone else appeared behind our hero's back. It seems to be the same girl hunter who was hired to follow our hero.